Hey everybody, Mike Portnoy here, and you're hanging right here at World PROG-NATION.
Hello everybody, this is Alfredo with World PROG-NATION, and I'm sitting here with the legendary Mike Portnoy at the Fillmore in San Francisco.
Beautiful place.
All right. Mike, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure. I love your page and your all your posts and everything. So my pleasure.
All right, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. Just getting into the swing of things. Tonight's the fourth show. First two were kind of like warm-ups. Then last night in LA was amazing. We were firing on all cylinders. Had like a who's who of musicians in the audience. So yeah, I think we're up and running and ready to rock now. So yeah, it's been so far so good.
All right. You are touring behind your new Sons of Apollo album, 2020, or I said 2020.
Or MMXX, whatever you want to call it, however it comes out of the mouth.
All right.
I call it 2020, but
2020?
it could be whatever you want.
Okay, it's a great album. I really like it.
Thank you.
And so let me ask you about it. I imagine that when you were writing the first album with the band, you were building and defining the sound, of the band from the ground up. And I imagine that writing the second album, this time around, is a completely different experience. You're solidifying your musical identity. Can you tell us a little about the writing process?
Well, the process was the same, but obviously the dynamics and the relationship within the band was different. When we made the first album, a bunch of us had all worked with each other individually. Obviously, I'd worked with Derek in Dream Theater, and I worked with Billy in Winery Dogs. I worked with Ron in a whole bunch of different things. But it was the first time that we all wrote together, or at least, me, Derek, and Ron at that point. So, it was a matter of getting familiar with each other and each other's processes and personalities. And then we ended up touring all year long. So we spent all year together on dressing rooms and buses and planes every day and every night. So when it came time to making the second record, obviously there was a much better, chemistry, personal chemistry, because of that. But the process itself was pretty much exactly the same, because it was so smooth the first time around. We decided not to mess with it. So basically we did the same thing with basically myself, Derek, and Bumblefoot, assembling all the music, and Derek and Ron had a million ideas, so we put it all together, the three of us, and then at that point tracked the music, and then had Jeff starting to work on the melodies and lyrics. So the process was similar, but the chemistry was much better.
Great. It certainly delivers on your promise of having a band with chops, but also strong songs and melodies.
Well, I'll give that credit to Jeff, because I think he brings such a soulful AOR kind of voice to this progressive music. A lot of progressive bands have these operatic vocals or more classical influence, whereas Jeff is more, classic rock, AOR, soulful. So I think that's a great aspect to bring. And then me and Ron doing all the harmonies gives it a bit of a Van Halen flavor maybe, or something like that. So it was important for us to not just be this wanky prog band. We wanted to have strong, memorable, hooky songs, and also some swagger and some vibe to it, some personality.
Yeah. Today's Eddie Van Halen's birthday, by the way.
Yeah. Happy birthday, Ed. We love you.
All right, so you mentioned this before. You have a few shows under your belt, and you mentioned that it's just firing on all cylinders by now.
Yeah. It got up and running pretty quickly, yeah.
That's great.
Last night in LA was really, really great. That'll be a hard one to beat, so we'll see.
All right. Is there a song from the new album that it's most fun playing live?
It's hard to gauge so far. New World Today is difficult. We have to concentrate a lot during that one. That's pretty complex. So I would say the songs that you have to really concentrate like that are not so much fun. I like the ones where you could just get into the groove, and like Fall to Ascend is fun. Asphyxiation's a fun one, although for the other guys, that's a pretty tough one. King of Delusion's a great one. I love them all. It's so early in the tour, I'm enjoying them all.
Yeah.
Ask me again a few months from now, I'll probably hate them all.
Well, let's hope not, Mike. All right. Now you are very involved in social media, and and also with your fans. You are always really honest in your interactions. Unfortunately, things are oftentimes taken out of context or misinterpreted. And this is a big deal. How are you able to shake off this inaccuracies or this negative stuff and remain as open and accessible as you are?
It's frustrating because I put a huge importance on always telling the truth and being honest and open with the fans. I never try to sugarcoat something or bullshit or say the politically correct thing. I speak from the heart, and so sometimes that comes back to bite me in the ass, and I've learned to have to try to watch what I say, and a lot of times I'll see stuff misinterpreted or whatever, so sometimes I'll chime in to try to at least set the record straight, and then even that gets misinterpreted. So I try to I'm trying to learn how to bite my tongue as much as I can. I told you before we started, I don't want to talk about Dream Theater because even in the case of them, even when I try to say something nice, like, oh, I miss those guys or whatever, then even that gets misinterpreted. People are like, oh, he's lingering on the band or he misses them, oh, blah, blah, blah. So, without getting, into a Dream Theater question, I'm saying even when I say something nice, it somehow gets twisted, and it's frustrating. It's really frustrating. But what am I going to do? I'm not going to not do interviews, I mean, there's some people that will just shut down and stop doing interviews, and I'm not going to let social media, shut me up.
Win, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and certainly your honesty.
I just try to be careful.
Yeah, your honesty and accessibility is something that endears you to the fans, and that brings us all closer together.
Well, I mean, I've always been like that because I'm just as much of a fan myself. I was always the tape trader in the band back in the '80s, and then when the internet came around, my forum and all the other bands' forums of the bands I love, I would always chime in and get involved with that. So social media was a natural form of expression for me because I want to interact with the fans because I'm just as much of a fan. And then I get blasted for that too. Like the other day I made a comment about Joey Kramer and Aerosmith, just talking like a fan, like anybody else, and then somebody blasted me like, why don't you just concentrate on your own self? How dare you talk about another band? It's like, well, wait, you're allowed to talk about another band, but I can't. I'm a fan as well, and I'm allowed to have an opinion just as well. I'm not saying my opinion's right. It's just an opinion. It's just my take on a situation as a fan.
Yeah. So you mentioned that you're a fan. You have a deep love and passion for the arts in general. When you talk about, say, movies or whatever thing, other than music, and that influences you. So it's apparent your interests go beyond the drums.
Absolutely.
How did you decide to become a drummer and not, say, a guitar player, a bass player, which you're a great bass player?
Oh, thank you. I love playing bass.
A singer or an actor.
One day I want to form a Ramones cover band, but I want to be the bass player.
You want to be a bass player?
Yeah. Well, I started on piano actually when I was young. That was the first instrument I took lessons for, and I started to learn how to read music and stuff by playing piano, but it just wasn't rock and roll enough for me. I was a fan of Keith Moon and John Bonham. I needed to have something more aggressive and more rock and roll. So I ended up migrating to the drums, but it didn't change my love for all the other instruments. And all throughout junior high school and high school, and even going to Berkeley, I studied music theory and harmony and ear training and sight singing and all those other things. I wanted to learn everything about every instrument and about music in general, not just be a drummer. So, I mean, all that stuff has helped me be a better musician in general, whether I'm writing vocal melodies or harmonies or, being involved with the song structures and arrangements. And, I'll be writing with any of the bands I'm in and not only arranging parts, but saying, oh, wait, what if you go up a minor third, for the bridge or whatever, having that knowledge has helped me be able to communicate with all the players I work with.
Yeah, that's certainly important for a guy like you who plays with a bunch of people, right?
Yeah.
Now, plays into my next question. You play in many different bands with completely different styles. Are there other styles of music that you're interested in getting into creatively?
I think I got them all covered. I mean, I've never wanted to do jazz or Latin or, I'm just not good at any of that stuff. So everything within the rock and metal world that my musical taste likes, I think I'm pretty much covered. With the Winery Dogs, I got classic rock power trio. With Metal Allegiance, my thrash metal roots and love is, utilized there. Sons of Apollo is the more prog metal, shreddy kind of over-the-top stuff. Flying Colors is more like poppy and alternative with that kind of Muse and Radiohead sprinkled in. And then Transatlantic and the Neil Morse Band are both like real pure prog. So that's my musical taste right there. But I can't say any one of them like really sum me up. I think you need to see the spectrum of all the bands I'm a part of to really understand the spectrum of my love for different styles of music. But in answer to your question, I don't think there's any other areas that I haven't hit yet. I think we're pretty well covered right now.
So no country record?
No, definitely not.
Okay. Now for all young players and even old players out there, how important do you think playing together with different musicians is to the development of a musician? Seeing Sons of Apollo live, I can certainly say that it's so much beyond 5 players playing their instrument.
Well, I would say to any young musician, it's mandatory to play with other musicians. It's great to be in your room practicing for hours and getting your chops together. That's equally as important, but you can't just do that. You got to play with other musicians in the context of songs and listen to other players and play off of other players. So that's really important. But I will say, I wouldn't recommend to young players to be in 6 bands like I am now. Don't forget I spent 25 years in one band, and that was why that band succeeded, because all of us focused on that one band, and we were absolutely determined, and we persevered. So, if you really want to make it, you got to find your band, find your voice, and stick with it, and be faithful to that, and passionate about that, and focused on that. I think it's okay to play with other bands, once you've developed, once you've gotten yourself to where you want to go, then it's nice to have those options. But for young players, I would say find your dream band, playing your dream music, and then stay focused on that, because you need to stay focused and persevere in order to make it.
All right, that's certainly some great advice. So, Mike, this month has been a pretty difficult month for music fans. Losing
Sean Reinert yesterday, yeah. And of course Neil a few weeks ago was absolutely devastating.
Yeah. Let's talk about Neil. You've gone on record, saying that Neil has been a great influence on you. And, you guys
the biggest.
Friends. Yeah. When was the first time you listened to Rush or saw Rush live?
First time I saw him live was December 9th, 1982, on the Signals Tour at Nassau Coliseum. And at that point, I had been a fan for about a year or so. I really dug into him and then got obsessed around when Moving Pictures came out and Signals. And then worked my way backwards. All my favorite albums were the ones that preceded those, like Hemispheres, Farewell to Kings, Permanent Waves. Those are my favorites, but I didn't really discover them until a few years after those albums. Yeah, and it turned my world upside down. It was the right band at the right time for me. Because before that, I was starting out on drums, and I was learning from John Bonham and Keith Moon and Peter Criss and Marky Ramone. More simple, straight-ahead stuff, and that was good for me to learn how to get around a kit. But then when I was around 13 or 14 in the early 80s, that's when I discovered Rush and Neil, and at that point I wanted to grow and learn more and learn on time signatures and build a giant big kit and play more complex music. So it was the right band at the right time for me. And then I got completely obsessed and also discovered other progressive music like Yes and Genesis and Crimson and those drummers, Bill Bruford, Phil Collins, Terry Bozzio, all those guys. But Neil and Rush were always number one for me.
So what's one thing that you'll remember the most about Neil?
As a drummer or as a person? I mean,
Either.
well, I mean, I'm honored to have known him as well. I mean, I spent 20, 30 years idolizing him and being his biggest fan, and all those years, it was mainly the drum kit. The drum kit was such a fascination for me. He always built such amazing kits and put so much thought into it. I would always get the tour programs where he would write about the kit and what the new things that are on it, and I would just look at those photos like most other kids were looking at Playboy centerfolds. I was looking at Neil Peart drum kits. So yeah, and then obviously his playing goes without saying. I learned how to really develop parts and orchestrate drum parts to build and change and develop within the song. And then, so that was biggest stuff for me as a fan. And then later on, once I got to know him, I was so inspired by what a gracious person he was. He obviously always had this reputation of being so quiet and isolated and private, and he was, and he guarded that. Very, very important. It was very important for him to guard that. But once you were somehow allowed into that inner circle, he was always so sweet and kind and generous, and always sent me holiday emails and always send me, his new books and stuff like that. And, it was a relationship that I'll always cherish, and I was honored to have.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that,
Yeah.
Mike. Now, I have a couple more questions. These are from our PROG-NATION citizens. This one goes, you're a very sentimental person. Your house is filled with music memorabilia, and you even started to clean out the closet and sell some very rare pieces from your musical history. What are some things that you'll never give away?
Well, almost everything I've shared or sold or given away are things that I have duplicates of. I don't think I could ever part with any, like I have at least one or two or three of everything. So it got to a point, it's like, well, do I really need three Siamese monsters? Really? That's a huge example, but even small examples, like, do I really need a pile of Dream Theater laminates of hundreds of them? Why? Might as well share them. It's just cluttering up my house. My wife is always on my ass from all the shit I collect. So I might as well give them to homes that would, people that would really appreciate having them. So, in answer to your question, what would I never get rid of? I mean, well, I have a Rush replica drum kit that Neil actually signed for me, so I would never ever get rid of that. Actually, all my replica kits. I have a Who kit and a Zeppelin kit and a Beatles kit. I think all my kits I have to keep at least one of each of. Yeah, those are great. But luckily, I did make multiple versions of most of my kits while I was in Dream Theater, because I would have one in America, one in Europe, and one in Japan. Tama would always give me multiple kits. And it's really silly for me to have all these. So, now there's Backstage Auctions is a great company that does these kind of auctions, and they've come to me and they go to everybody else, whether it be Megadeth or Anthrax or Metallica or whatever. Everybody always contributes stuff for these auctions. So I've started working with them the last couple of years, just helping to unload some of the stuff, and then I put a lot of stuff on my website as well, sticks. I mean, when a tour ends with Flying Colors, I don't need 400 Flying Color sticks at home. So, I might as well get rid of them. So that's kind of where I'm at now. Maybe I'm growing up a little bit.
All right, and one last bonus question. And this one was asked by Pete Myers of Chicago. How did it feel to lose so badly to your daughter Melody when the Beatles named that tune?
If it was anybody else, I would have been devastated. But in this particular case, I was so proud. It was amazing. She wiped the floor with me. I was shocked. Before we did it, I was like, all right, I'm not going easy on you. And she wiped the floor with me. Yeah. I creamed Neil Morris. I killed him twice. But she killed me. So now, I don't know. I want a rematch. Next Christmas, I'm getting a rematch. Yeah. Maybe she just has better hearing than me. I'm trying to make excuses.
Well, if I remember correctly, you got pretty much all the titles that she got, but she was faster.
Oh, I absolutely know every one of them, but speed is the name of that game. That's what the point of that game. It's that speed. You got to nail it. I mean, both of us would know every song. That wasn't in question. It was a matter of how quick you can get it. Yeah,
Get that content, right?
exactly.
All right. Well, Mike, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to us today.
My pleasure.
Is there any message you'd like to leave to your World PROG-NATION fans?
No, I love what you guys do, and I enjoy the posts. So thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you, Mike.
Cool.